Now it's time for Culture Talk. This is a segment where we discuss culturally relevant topics that you can use to start conversations about your faith. And I'm joined today with astrophysicist Jeff Zweerink. Thank you for joining me.
Sandra's looking forward to our conversation.
I know. We're going to be talking about that UFO report that's going to be coming out. Actually, by the time this airs, it will have been out.
At least parts of it, yes.
Parts of it, yes. So you know what? What are people anticipating they're going to communicate in this report?
I don't know exactly, but given what I've seen, is there are some videos of things that seem to be moving off of moving in the sky on cameras, radar images that show up. So I imagine it's a whole slew of things like that. Just throughout history, it seems like as fighter pilots and people have been up flying, they've seen stuff, and I think they're just releasing some of that so that more people see what's out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of excitement, not only for scientists, of course, but also for just the general public, because in pop culture, we see constantly films and TV shows about UFOs and aliens. So there's a lot of curiosity about that. Now, from a Christian perspective, some would say that aliens actually are not physical beings, but spiritual beings. So if this report indicates that there are UFOs and that that we can infer from that there are aliens, does that then debunk the theory that aliens are spiritual beings?
I don't think so. And there's a lot in that question, because first you have to show that what you're seeing is not some sort of physical phenomena. I mean, the reality of it is we're dealing with the Department of Defense, military type stuff. And so we know that there are other entities out there who are against our military and looking for ways to spoof stuff and figure out what sort of technology. So I bet there's a lot of stuff going on that we just are never going to find out because our government doesn't want to let it out, because it's part of how it's protecting us. And so I think there's a lot of that. But let's say we sort through all that. Now, historically, as you go look at a lot of those UFOs, as people go in and look, most of those have a physical explanation. There's fires given off from oil rigs out in the ocean. There's stuff falling out of the sky from satellites, all sorts of things that have physical explanations. But you do seem to have this residual amount of, maybe on the order of 1% that don't seem to be explained well. What's interesting about that 1% is that it seems like those are the 1% tend to have, when you're looking at them, the way they behave seems to defy the laws of physics. Right. Well, if you defy the laws of physics, you're no longer constrained to this physical world, and that kind of gives evidence of beyond the physical, more spiritual or interdimensional beings. Right. And from a biblical perspective, that makes sense, because the Bible tells us we're obviously creatures here, but God has created angels and demons as well. And so that all makes sense from a Christian perspective.
Right. Yeah, you know what? And that is definitely one perspective to have on this this issue. Another kind of thing that becomes an issue for Christians is that when we think that there are aliens, and that maybe affects how we view humans as being exceptional. So how would you respond to that?
Well, I think it's really important that nowhere in the Bible does it say that humans are exceptional and that's why we're valuable. Right. Specifically, what it says is we are created in God's image. Right. So if we are exceptional and that's what brings value, well, if we find other creatures that God might have created that are aware of God or created in His image in some fashion, then that would diminish ours. Kind of the way I like it, I've got a number of kids. If my oldest kid was special because they're unique, the moment I had a second kid, they lose value. Right. Well, that's not right. They're valuable because they're my kids. We're valuable because we're created in God's image. Now, whether God has created other physical beings out there or not, that's an open question, both theologically and scientifically. Fascinating question. But if we find other creatures out there, all that means is that God's created other creatures, and so that would no way diminish our value, because our value is from being in God's image, not being unique.
Right. You know what? And I haven't heard anyone articulate it in that way, that it isn't that we are exceptional necessarily, but that we're unique, that we're created in God's image. So I think that's helpful, and a helpful distinction for those who feel like, oh, there can't be, because then that means we're like lower on the totem pole, so to speak.
Right.
So, as Christians are exploring this idea, like the tendency might be to be a little bit scared of this sort of news of the existence of UFOs and aliens. What would you say to someone who just feels like very uncomfortable about any news about aliens and UFOs?
The first thing I would say is just recognize there's a history of people claiming UFOs, and as we've investigated, they tend to have physical explanations that are far more mundane and less interesting than we would like them to be. You know, it's just interesting phenomena that we see, and I mean, especially dealing with this, you got fighter pilots pushing the envelope, high-tech radar. You're pushing the boundaries of things. You're going to see weird stuff. That's just kind of a common thing. So most of this is going to be unusual or just weird explanations, but nonetheless mundane stuff. But from a Christian perspective, I look at this and say, you know what, we know the Bible describes the kind of world we live in. We live in a world where God's the creator, that he's created us with a purpose. There's the angelic realm. We see the rebellion in the angelic realm, that angelic realm wants to destroy humanity. So realize that that's part of God's plan, whether there are aliens out there or not, that it's all part of God's plan and what we know he's going to do through Christ's work on the cross and his coming. None of what we find in terms of aliens is going to influence that. So there's a great confidence I have as a Christian. Let's go out and explore. I think it's going to be fascinating. I don't think we're going to find aliens if I had to bet on it, but who knows? Who knows what God has done? And so that's part of the fascination of doing science, is figuring out what God's done.
Yeah. Are you at all excited about, like, maybe they're going to give some sort of discovery or admit to some findings? Are you excited about anything in particular?
I don't think we're going to find anything unusual. I think we're going to find weird stuff that is hard to explain, that would be fun to scientifically explore. But quite honestly, since this is coming from the military and government, I expect it to be something that suits their agenda to take care of our country. And so that would be my personal take on that. And people are going to have lots of different takes. So I'm excited to see what's there because people have been talking about it. I don't expect we're going to find evidence of aliens. I expect we're going to find evidence of technology that is beyond what we thought might be out there, but has been developed by either us or some other country here on the Earth.
Okay. Well, yeah, I like hearing your enthusiasm and your confidence to explore. That's a good perspective to have. So now the pressing question, what is your favorite extraterrestrial film or show?
I think one of the ones that's fascinating to me was a movie called Signs.
Oh, yes.
And the reason why it was fascinating, and it's interesting because my kids have an entirely different perspective on it. You got Star Wars, obviously things where aliens are real, but that was the first one where it's here on Earth, where the alien actually existed. Almost, maybe it's because I grew up on Scooby-Doo. All the aliens were always some sort of plot and ploy.
Yeah, those meddling kids.
This was the first one where it was actually real. And so that's the one that I like, but I couldn't narrow it down to one, but that one is the one that comes to mind.
Nice, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for that. So where can people find more information on this topic?
I think specifically, if you want to go look at UFOs and what do you mean, my colleagues Ken Samples, Hugh Ross, Mark Clark have written a great book, Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. And you know what? If you want to get more information aside from that book, you can also check out Jeff Zweerink's book, Is There Life Out There? Be sure to go to reasons.org and search for that.